All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you to everyone who is joining us today live for our Lunch and Learn outdoor school for all Maine students. And a special welcome to everyone who is watching the recording. A few days at one of Maine's outdoor learning centers can be absolutely transformative for middle school students. I suspect that many of us know this from personal experience, our own or that of kids in our lives and communities. But did you know that fewer than a quarter of all Maine middle school students have the opportunity to connect with our natural heritage through an outdoor school program? Legislation being introduced this year aims to fix that and make sure that all students get that life-changing opportunity. An act to support outdoor school for all Maine students would support students in 4th through 8th grades to spend 2 nights and 3 days at an outdoor learning center and ensure that that experience is integrated with their school curriculum and aligned with state learning standards so that we can get kids outside connecting with nature. Here to tell us more about outdoor schools, the national momentum around nature-based education, and the Maine Outdoor School for All campaign are advocates from Maine's premier outdoor learning centers. We are delighted to welcome today Drew Dumsch, the president and CEO of the Ecology School, Nick Fisichelli, president and CEO of Schoodic Institute at Acadia National Park, and Anne Sedlack, who's an attorney at Preti Flaherty and a member of the University of Maine 4-H Camp and Learning Centers at Tanglewood and Blueberry Cove Board of Directors. A personal note, not only was Anne a camp counselor at Tanglewood for my 2 kids, she is also the sister of Will Sedlack, so we are making this a family affair today. My name is Kathleen Neal. I am the Senior Director of Policy and Partnerships here at Maine Conservation Voters and Maine Conservation Alliance. Our organizations represent more than 13,000 members and supporters dedicated to protecting Maine's democracy and our environment. MCA does that through education, collaboration, and advocacy, and MCV by influencing public policy, holding politicians accountable, and winning elections. A few technical notes for today. We will hear from our speakers first and tackle your questions in the Q&A session at the end. You don't have to wait though. You can send questions to me through the chat whenever they occur to you. I will compile them, synthesize those with similar themes, and ask as many of them as possible following the presentation. We ask that you not message speakers directly as we want their focus on the presentation, not the chat box. If you have any technical difficulties or just feel inspired to let him know how brilliant his sister is, you can message Will Sedlack through the chat. This event is being recorded and the video will be posted on our website later this afternoon, where you can also find recordings of all of our previous programs. Thank you again for joining us. And Drew, I am going to turn it over to you to kick things off.
Thank you, Kathleen. I'll pop on and start sharing the screen. Wait. There we go. Full screen. We all set? Great. Happy Friday Lunch and Learn, everyone. Again, my name's Drew Dumsch. I'm the president and CEO of the Ecology School at Riverbend Farm, which is right behind me. Definitely, this is not a seasonal photo. We still have lots of snow here in Saco. I'm going to start by just giving a little bit of an intro of where this work all started. And really, the focal point of the idea of Maine Outdoor School for All is that every student, and I appreciate, Kathleen, that you put in you italicized all, which I think is the crucial point of that every kid in Maine has the chance to do environmental living and learning in our great state. This work actually began more than 14 years ago in 2010 when the University of Maine 4-H Camp and Learning Centers, Schoodic Institute, the Ecology School in Chewonki started to network and work together. And 4 amazing outcomes have happened steadily throughout the past 14 years. Together, we've raised over $3 million in scholarship support for Maine upper elementary, middle school students and classroom teachers to come to our sites and do our programming. Really a huge shout out to Mina B. Sewell Foundation as being the backbone funder of this work over the past more than a decade. And then definitely strong support from folks like Quimby Family Foundation, Jane's Trust, Betterment, among others. Together, we have also, as the ELMS Network, done evaluation work with University of Maine, potential research. We collaborate on curriculum as a community of practice. And then also we've been able to provide statewide teacher training opportunities as a network. And at this point, you know, really what we're doing, ELMS is kind of starting to evolve into Maine Outdoor School for All. And to help you understand what we mean by outdoor school, I'm going to hand it over to Nick.
Great, thank you, Drew. And like both Drew and Anne, I'm super excited to be here with you all today. And this is actually the first time that we've given this presentation. So this is all new and evolving, and we're really excited to share it all with you. So the next couple of slides, I want to just talk about outdoor school and specifically the program, the outdoor school program, and then outdoor school providers. All right, so what do we mean by outdoor school program? And this is really about a multi-day, overnight, immersive education experience here in Maine. And this is during the school year, working with schools, coming to the outdoor school centers across the state for really this, again, hands-on, immersive education experience. And the intention is that it's integrated with the classroom curriculum, it's aligned with state learning standards, and it's also academically rigorous. And I just want to share a couple of quotes from teachers before we go to the next slide. Just a couple quotes from teachers on this. The outdoor school program was a fabulous opportunity for hands-on, extended, intense and intentional Maine ecosystem education. It was special to be together as 6th graders, teachers, staff, and parent chaperones to bond through group work, 5 meals together, rooming together, discovering side by side, end quote. And then another one from another teacher that participated in a program, quote, outdoor school has been a great experience for our 7th grade students. In an outdoor hands-on setting, the program reinforces many science, math, social studies, and language arts concepts that we teach in our classrooms. It gives students and adults an opportunity to develop positive relationships with each other that we carry forth for the rest of the school year. It's experiential learning at its best. It is well organized and staffed, safe and fun. And then last thing I'll say here is that, you know, beyond the school curriculum, beyond the state learning standards, you know, it's intended to be really integrated into the classroom. And then it also wants to go beyond just state learning standards as well. And so one last quote, besides educational goals, practical skills such as being responsible for themselves, their luggage, clothes, lunches, etc., are all benefits from this trip. Some of these students are spending time away from home and families for the first time, which is a great life experience. Also, working as team members and doing activities in an unfamiliar environment will help them on the maturity process. Great, so that's a little bit on the outdoor school program. Next slide. So the outdoor school providers. This is the network of outdoor schools across the state of Maine. And you'll see here some text that's actually text from the pending legislation that Anne will be talking about here in just a little bit. But these are organizations and partnerships really that have physical campuses, that have professional education staff, and robust partnerships with school districts and with teachers. And as you see, a couple logos at the bottom of the page here, the Maine Environmental Education Association, the Nature-Based Education Consortium, Maine Outdoor School for All, just a nod to the fact that really here in Maine, we have this really wonderful, robust environmental education ecosystem. And there's really a mantra that a rising tide lifts all boats. And I think this is really applicable here, that this idea of the outdoor school is part of this larger ecosystem of environmental education that exists here in the state of Maine. Next slide. All right, so why outdoor school? And Kathleen got to this a little bit earlier, and Drew as well. And there's really equity and access is such a central part of this. And again, that's the italicizing the all here. And this morning, I was looking at some teacher quotes that we have in a document from teachers who brought their students, their classes to the outdoor school program at Schoodic Institute in Acadia National Park in our partnership with the National Park Service. And in fact, I was late for a meeting this morning because I got so engrossed in the great quotes, and I just wanted to share a couple more here on that really capture the why for outdoor school. And so quote, we're a very small, isolated rural school district. Many of our students have not left the county. Travel of this nature is vitally important to their growth as individuals. They learn to appreciate the beauty and importance of the natural world around them, and we hope they ultimately become stewards of the land, protecting and preserving it for future generations, end quote. And so I think that's a piece that sometimes for us, it's easy to forget that not everybody has equal access to our great outdoor spaces and to high quality education. And I couldn't believe how many quotes I read from teachers whose students had never been to the ocean, never been to the coast of Maine before. And these are typically 5th or 6th graders. And sometimes we kind of can lose sight of that not everybody has these great opportunities, but all students, all kids in Maine should have these opportunities. And I'll just end with one last quote that's from one of the outdoor school educators reflecting on a program. Quote, one of my best memories from last fall happened with the boys from a large inner city school that participated. On their first night at camp, I was walking with a group of boys to the campfire. It was a crystal clear new moon night and the stars were spectacular. The boys had been kind of rowdy as we left the dining hall, but as we walked down the hill in the dark, they got quiet, taking in the wonder of that sky. In the silence, I heard one of the boys let out a soul-deep sigh and murmur in a tone of absolute awe, "I've never seen the stars before." And so this is a student growing up in the big city in Maine, that happens to be in Portland, where there's light pollution and you don't have the opportunity to see the Milky Way. And so all those quotes I shared were from teachers from schools across the state, Ella Lewis, Portland, Connors Emerson, Otisfield, Fort Fairfield. So just some examples from experiences from teachers that are part of this. And so lots of reasons for outdoor school for all Maine students. Drew, I think I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks, Nick. And those are fantastic quotes. And just to let everyone know that this kind of exciting growth and evolution of outdoor school for all is happening in other parts of the country. In Oregon, their outdoor school for all, the state is actually funding, at this point, 85% of middle school students in Oregon are going to outdoor school, which is remarkable. And just last year, the state of Washington passed state legislation to fund outdoor school for all in their state too. Beyond the outdoor school for all Maine students legislation that Anne will talk about in just a few minutes, we have heard that Minnesota is also teeing up legislation for outdoor school for all, and also Maryland are working on it. So it's really becoming a national movement. And I've been honored to be working with the Association of Nature Center Administrators nationally on this work of the idea of a national outdoor school for all. And really, as we start, it's interesting whether it's in Maine with the Maine Outdoor School for All network or talking to our colleagues at outdoor schools around the country. We really see these kind of high quality, academically rigorous and immersive learning experiences as part of training ecological citizens and citizens who will contribute to hopefully expanding green economies. And actually the quote I've got on this slide is from the Oregon Outdoor School for All, their economic report that they put out after the first few years of doing Outdoor School for All. So we in our other states are seeing really strong impact because of the Outdoor School for All funding in Oregon and now Washington and hopefully soon in Maine. And really looking at some of the strategies where Maine is hoping to grow its economic development, training our youth in the areas of conservation and forestry and sustainability and agriculture really helps them become future stewards and citizens. It's funny, often when I meet someone who's not familiar with an outdoor school, I'll say, well, it's kind of like summer camp, but it's every kid in the school plus their teacher get to do it. And we focus on so many things. Often I'll say, well, someone will ask, what do you focus on? And I'll say conservation, ecology, environmental science, food systems, social emotional wellness, forestry, watersheds. I'll name off 10 things and they'll say, no, what do you focus on? And the answer is all of that in our multi-day immersive programs, we can focus on putting all those pieces together with our students. And really this next slide again hones in on some of Maine's economic development strategies and the economically disadvantaged students and to give them an experience in an outdoor school and have that equity across the board that every student in Maine gets to be prepared as an ecological citizen of the future is something that the Maine Outdoor School for All really takes seriously. And one exciting thing, you already mentioned it, Nick, in terms of our work with Maine Environmental Education Association, the Nature-Based Education Consortium, but I'd like to announce hot off the press, some of you are already familiar, that the second version of Maine's environmental literacy plan has been just put up on the Maine DOE website. ELMS, the former version of Maine Outdoor School for All, we are honored to be partnering with Maine Audubon, the Maine Environmental Education Association, Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, and Department of Education in the crafting of this new document. And I've got the web link up here and definitely encourage you folks to check out this amazing document that lays forward a path of a K-12 scope and sequence to create a Maine environmentally literate citizenry. One other thing I wanted to point out is the Maine Environmental Education Association and Maine Outdoor School for All Network and the Nature-Based Education Consortium have been working with Senator Collins on a federal bill, No Child Left Inside. Senator Collins is a co-sponsor of that bill that would fund nationwide environmental literacy and includes an outdoor school pilot project. And just to be clear, that kind of funding is not to overlap with what we're asking for the scholarship funding for Outdoor School for All. It would do things like capacity building nationwide, research, a lot of other exciting parts of the work we do as outdoor schools. I'm going to hand it over to Anne now to get specific on the Outdoor School for All Maine Students legislation. Over to you, Anne.
Thanks, Drew, and thanks, Nick, for starting that off. When Drew and Nick and their colleagues approached us at Preti for this idea, I couldn't have been more excited because I have deep connections to the Maine Outdoor Centers, working at Tanglewood and being on the board. And it's just been a joy working with them on this. And now to really, we're joking and calling it my mom's Super Bowl, where it's a full Sedlack collaboration here today at the Friday Lunch and Learn. So thank you all for attending. I wanted to give a little bit more details of what this would actually look like in Maine. And so we have been working on draft legislation since probably last spring. And what we've come up with is a model that we think will work in Maine. And how it would work is that outdoor providers would partner with schools in the state. And the school would pick a grade from 4th to 8th grade. And that grade would then be their cohort. So then if they chose 6th grade, every 6th grade after that would get a chance to be involved in the outdoor education program. They might depend that choice based on school curriculum. You know, what if one of their elementary schools is consolidating and they're all going to middle school at a certain year, and that might be how they base it on. And so we want to make sure we give schools choice in how they structure this. And so the school would pick their grade, and the provider, the after school provider, would apply for a grant at the UMaine Cooperative Extension. And so the UMaine Cooperative Extension would make sure that this program is reaching across the entire state. So they'd be working with school partners, with outdoor providers, to really make sure that we're reaching everyone. And so it would then fund a 3-day, 2-night program where students and their teachers would come to one of the outdoor centers, share meals, learn together, and really get that opportunity to have fun outside together. We've determined that it would cost about $6.2 million per year. That is a big price tag, but compared to Washington and Oregon, quite small in fact. But it's based on, there's about 14,000 students in each cohort in the state of Maine. And then it would be also overhead, where the Department of Agricultural, Conservation, and Forestry would be receiving the money from the legislature, and then also from the UMaine Cooperative Extension to distribute that funding. And, you know, we're aware that there are a lot of great priorities this session, and we're hopeful this gets funded in full. But if it doesn't, there's a provision in the legislative document that if funding is not complete, then grants are to be prioritized for schools and communities historically underserved by outdoor education. You know, we've mentioned this a few times in this PowerPoint, but you know, about less than 25% of the students in Maine get this opportunity. I was actually in the State House cafeteria, and there was a group of middle schoolers testifying on outdoor recess for middle school. And I asked them if they had gotten on any of these programs, if they had done an outdoor education program. And they said no, and they were like, there's kids in the state who do get to do that. And so it's this idea that it's not fair that because a school district has the ability to apply for grants or might have some more funding, that they can go on this program. So that's a little bit, and we can, you know, get more into the question and answers about a little bit more how it works. But we also want to be, we want to big thanks to our legislative partners. So our lead sponsor is Stacey Brenner. I'm sure a lot of you know of her. She works for Maine Farmland Trust and is just an dynamic woman and has already done so much for this bill. She actually is referred this as the feel-good bill of the session and is telling all of her friends that, and I think it's a great title for it. We also have been reaching out and have co-sponsors lined up. So the bill isn't printed yet, so these are not official yet, but we've gotten yeses where we really thought about having this be bipartisan. And so our lead co-sponsor is going to be Nate Carlo. He's from a similar district as Stacey Brenner, but he's a young Republican who's on the school board in his local area and really excited about this. And then we have Senator Bennett, Senator Keim, Senator Pouliot, all Republicans in the Senate, and then Senator Rennie, who's a Democrat. And then in the House, we have Representative Abdi, she's a Democrat. Representative Gatine, he's a Democrat, he's also on appropriations, which will be really key for us. And then Representative Dana, who's a tribal rep. What's next is that the bill is still stuck in the revisor's office. I don't know if you all have heard, but it's over 2,000 bills that were submitted to the revisor's office this session, and that I would say probably 50 to 60% through them all. But they're working hard, and it's a little bit stuck in there, but we're excited for when it finally gets printed and referred. Our goal is to get it referred to the Agricultural, Conservation, and Forestry Committee. So as I mentioned, it's going to be going to the Department of Agricultural, Conservation, and Forestry, who already have partnerships with UMaine Cooperative Extension, and we think it's a great fit for them. And they also are really excited about that, which kind of gets me to this next slide. Thanks, Drew, for going on. Is the stakeholder buy-in process. So from the beginning, we wanted this to be something that people felt like they had a voice in drafting. We didn't want anyone to feel left out. And so we kind of went on a listening tour where we met with countless people, like from the agencies. We met with the governor's office, Department of Education, Office of Policy Information, Department of Agriculture, Conservation and Forestry, Bureau of Parks and Land, and Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. And every time we met with one of those folks, it was, I hadn't experienced it. Like Hannah Pingree's children go to one of the UMaine Cooperative Extension programs. And it's just cool hearing about how everyone is impacted by this. We also met with people in the community. As Drew mentioned, Washington and Oregon have already done this. And so we made a point to reach out to the advocates who passed the legislation and those who are in charge of running the programs. We met with the education groups here in Maine to make sure that schools felt like they were bought in and that their voice was heard. A big partner for us has been the Maine Environmental Education Association. Amara over there has just taken this idea and run with it. And it's been really cool getting to work with her. And then we also are partnering with the Maine Youth for Climate Justice. They're an incredible group of young people who are advocates. They were a big part of the climate ed bill last year, and they've chosen this bill as one of their priorities. There's a lot of other partners that we won't get into because we only have a little bit of time, but also big thanks to Maine Conservation Voters for hosting this, but also taking this as one of their initiatives too. And so I'm going to pass it on to Nick to just tie in why this is important, why this should be funded. While there's many other things that are also funded, this is the one we're really excited about.
Great, thank you, Anne. And I think we've covered a few of these reasons. There are lots of them, and this equity and access really being, I think, paramount here. But there's another one. There's the economic aspects, and Drew touched on this a little bit, and workforce development, and this idea about growing local talent, I think is one of the reasons that really resonates with me. So my background is in climate change adaptation. And so as a scientist, my research aims to understand ongoing and future climate change effects and to engage learners of all ages in the science and solutions. And so in order to address this great challenge, we need to grow that local talent. We need a more diverse and talented next generation working in the fields and forests in Maine and on the waters of Maine as well. And I think this immersive introduction into our outdoor heritage through outdoor schools is an important piece of this process. And it's really an important piece of how we sustain our outdoor heritage in the state and in the local workforce. It's also, will help with the education workforce as well, and in helping to build the next generation of environmental educators that are the ones leading these experiences and engaging people in their natural resources and outdoor heritage. We've all heard about major losses from COVID. That's certainly a reality that persists, and learning losses that have happened. And this is intended to be one of the many ways to help with that issue. And then finally, again, with the access piece, that there are many teachers and many students, like the ones that Anne got to interact with, that want to be able to do this, but haven't had the opportunity.
Yeah, Nick, I mean, I have a very specific, I have teachers in both Sanford and Gorham who have wanted to come to the Ecology School for years. They've been trying to figure out the fundraising, PTA, and I know they wholeheartedly support this idea of really, with cash-strapped schools that have a lot of other important priorities too, that a bill like this would really help be a significant boost to getting their students to our outdoor school programs. Nick, I'm wondering, I mean, there's a lot of, we're talking about the Maine Outdoor School for All network, and then we're talking about the Outdoor School for All Maine Students legislation. I'm wondering, this next slide, if you could kind of walk us through how these efforts are kind of parallel, because one's a network and one's a legislation. So I'm going to put that slide up.
Right, exactly. Thank you, Drew. Yes, yeah, and we've been sort of talking about both of these pieces, and sort of they each need one another. So there's the legislation that Anne shared, which is really the funding behind making this possible, and then there's the network of outdoor schools that would be really the providers that would be the ones carrying out these education programs. And so there's two pieces to this: the legislation, which is an act to support outdoor school for all Maine students, and then there's the network, which is the Maine Outdoor School for All network, and which is really growing as we speak. And there are many outdoor schools in the state that are engaging in conversations to help grow this network. So of course, the Ecology School and Schoodic Institute, Chewonki, and the 4-H centers, the UMaine 4-H centers were sort of at the beginning of this, but it's really rapidly expanding, and there are many others engaged as well in this that we've been having conversations with, building to make sure that we have this robust network in order to make sure that this is a successful program. Places like Hurricane Island and Ripple Effect and Kiva Wavis, Maine Hudson Trails, Appalachian Mountain Club, the Cobscook Institute, and there are others as well that we are working with as this all evolves here rapidly. Drew, did that cover it for you? Anything else you wanted to add to that?
It's fantastic. So we need your help. We've got over 60 people on the webinar now, and I know other people will watch the recordings. So, really having folks advocate for the Outdoor School for All Maine Students legislation. We have a 2-pager introduction document that we can provide, telling your friends, family, colleagues, listservs, et cetera, about the legislation. We don't know when we'll be appearing before the committee. And am I right, Anne, it would most likely be the Agriculture, Conservation, Forestry Committee?
Yeah, so that's where we've been advocating. We've already talked with the chairs of that committee to get it directed in leadership. And once that bill is printed, we'll have an LD number, and that LD number will be able to keep you update on all of the great information when the committee hearings are scheduled, work sessions, votes, things like that. And if you sign up, I know they're going to mention it, their specific call of action. If you sign up for the MCV's listserv about petition to support this, we'll send out when that public hearing is scheduled. We would love if you could submit written testimony, come testify in person or over Zoom. We're really excited about this, and we want to make sure that legislators know that everyone in the community is excited about it as well.
And definitely what's been great, I can really point to some of our success in the past few years in the network is that we have an incredible network coordinator, Dr. Anika Miller-Rushing, and I've put her email contact here if you want more information or to volunteer in these efforts. And Anika will be convening a Maine Outdoor School for All Lunch and Learn on April 5th. So we're going to be putting out invites for that. So these are all ways you can help. And of course, in just a few minutes, we're going to start taking questions and we can discuss that further. I'd like to just thank you as we wrap up and happy to answer your questions. I want a little story behind this photo. This was taken just yesterday on the hill overlooking the Saco River at the Ecology School's Riverbend Farm campus. This is a row of 9th grade boys from Noble High School who came to outdoor school in 5th grade and had the chance to come back as 9th graders. And our Aaron Schultz, our program manager, was on the porch of our dining hall. Could not believe these 9th grade boys deliberately picked up their LB Adirondack chairs, moved them to the edge of the hill, and sat there quietly for 20 minutes, just looking and watching the river and the birds, because we've got bluebirds coming back and all that. And that's just, for me, a very recent kind of the power of outdoor school and how it changes behavior and outlook. So I leave you with that and maybe hand it back to the Maine conservation folks.
Drew, I really appreciate the real-time picture of that, and just looking at your background too. It's like a reminder, spring is coming. The world will be green again. Thank you. And thank all three of you for just an absolutely fabulous presentation. It is so important, everything you've shared with us today, and want to just let folks know that later this afternoon, you will get an email with a link to the recording and a link to links to a bunch of different resources. So you'll see in there a link to sign a petition. As Anne mentioned, this is going to be a really important way when we end up in front of the legislature testifying in support, we'll say, look at all these people who are in support of this bill as well. It will also be helpful because we'll be able to send that group, everybody who signs the petition, updates. So you'll be the first to know when the bill gets printed, when the public hearing gets scheduled. We can share talking points, anything like that. So join that group. You'll also find links to the new Maine Outdoor Schools for All website with tons of resources, including that fact sheet, and a link to Maine's environmental literacy plan, which is just a tremendous plan that reflects so much work and so much engagement. The larger conversation about how we get kids involved in environmental education. And finally, as Drew mentioned, one of the most important things you can do as a follow-up to this program is to connect with the students and teachers in your life, whether they are your own kids or kids you wander by on the mean streets of town, right? And say, hey, here's some really cool information about outdoor schools. Find out if the schools in your town participate, if they would like to, and share this list of programs and resources with them. Thank you so much for all of the good questions. You can keep those coming to me through the chat, and I'm going to try to balance out, ask what we've got already in the hopper and synthesize and see what we can get through. So first of all, Anne, Nick, and Drew, you are all so clearly passionate about this work and this project. And with a shout out to Anne Sedlack for asking this question, could you each share a little bit about your outdoor education experiences growing up and sort of how they have led to where you are in your work and in your advocacy?
I can start because it was my mom who asked the question, but William and I both went to 4-H camps in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, where I remember we learned to churn butter by shaking it in the container. And I will never forget that experience. But I also think that my parents had the resources to get us outside, get us in programming. And I worked at Tanglewood when I was in college as a summer camp counsel, and later on worked at an alternative high school where I worked with low-risk kids who are on, kind of the path towards youth prison here in Maine. And my parents were able to fund a couple of those children going to summer camp over the summer. And I got to see how those kids getting in a different experience, getting outdoors, benefited their experience in school. And so for me, I'm just tremendously excited about this idea because I think that our kids in Maine deserve to be outside and they deserve to have the same benefits as their friends who have a little bit more resources to get outside.
I was lucky enough as a kid, I had a grandmother, Norma Harrison, who would take me bird watching and walking. I actually did not have great science teachers in school. I was an English major in college, and I just stumbled. I'm from Michigan originally. I came out to Maine to work for Stone Environmental Schools in the early 90s and fell in love with the outdoor school model right at the beginning of my career. And I've always said that one reason I started the Ecology School was not every kid is lucky enough to have a Norma Harrison as a nature mentor. And I think our outdoor school educators can serve as that spark and those kind of original nature mentors for all the kids in Maine.
I love that Drew's background was as an English major, and so I came from the other side. That my background is in science, and so I'm really scientist, researcher, as I mentioned, in climate change adaptation. And so I think I came at this sort of through a different route, really recognizing the need to engage learners and students at this earlier age. And I had really my immersive experiences in college and not so much before that. And I luckily I kept with that at that point, but I didn't have the experiences earlier on, and many also today do not. And so that's where I think I've come to this and seen the importance of this in engaging kids earlier on. Kids have a lot of demands on their time, and with digital devices and other things taking them in other directions, they don't spend the amount of time outdoors that many of us did as kids, wandering around for hours on end in the great outdoors. And so this also is just helping to create that opportunity.
I think it's always fascinating to hear the backstories that lead us to the places that we are now. And so thank you so much. And Nick, building on that, when we think back on our own experiences and whether we had immersive, structured outdoor education or just the, kicked out the back door, don't come home till dinner kind of experience, there's so much that we learn from being outside and connecting with nature. And I wonder if you can just help clarify a little bit, what is the difference between an outdoor school program and a nature program, whether it's a local nature center, a day trip, day field trip kind of thing? What is it that makes this outdoor school model so different and distinct?
I think, Kathleen, it's not an either or. There are some many fantastic day use nature centers where people take walks and take classes, lots of great summer camps. I think what defines an outdoor school is that we're doing school year programming to support school curriculum, and it's the immersive, the multi-day, the living and learning together, that we're not distinguishing between you go to school to learn, you go home to live. We blur that the kids are taking meals together, they're helping set the table in the dining hall, they're getting to see the crescent moon rise last night. I could hear the kids hollering because there was a very cool, the planets and the moon last night, seeing the sunrise in the morning. It's all those kind of things that happen over multiple days that you can't necessarily get in a 1 hour schoolyard lesson or nature center lesson. But at the same time that we're very active in all these networks, we've already mentioned Maine Environmental Education Associate, Nature-Based Education Consortium. We're active, of course, Nick's affiliated with the National Park, Schoodic Institute, MOFGA, Maine Farmland Trust. I could probably just for the Ecology School list about 20 partners, including Maine Audubon, which is a day use nature center organization that we're doing work with. So we see outdoor school as unique in that it's deeply immersive. It couples the act of living and learning together in the experience, but then it's part of a much bigger kind of kindergarten to 12th grade scope and sequence that the environmental literacy plan in Maine really helps articulate. And again, I'll do a plug. Go check out the environmental literacy plan. Really inspirational, aspirational document.
That's so helpful to think about this as part of a constellation of educational experiences that are really crucial to preparing Maine kids to be educated, yes, but also productive and happy and engaged and connected to our state and our community. There's a little bit of a range in the grades that you're talking about targeting here. So that makes me think it's not probably the same curriculum for everybody. Would this legislation specify what kids would be learning? Is it specifically tied to climate change or anything like that? Or is it really up to the teachers and the providers to figure that out?
Yeah, as Drew mentioned in one of the slides, this isn't a mandate. And so it's really about building those connections between the schools and the outdoor schools. and making sure that the curriculum, the topics really integrate with what's being learned in the classroom. And that's one of the reasons there's some flexibility here, because local school, it's intended to be tailored by local schools and teachers. And that's why there's also a range of grades here, where each school district, it may fit better at a different age. And then each of the outdoor schools has a different menu and suite of programming opportunities as well, that then can relate more closely to what's being learned in each school. Drew, do you want to add to that?
No, I just think that flexibility, and I was honored to be part of the climate education bill process last year, and a huge shout out to Maine conservation voters for championing that. And we learned right away to be clear that it's not a mandate. This is an exciting grant program that allows Maine schools, upper elementary and middle schools, to partner with outdoor school providers to create a curriculum that fits into what they're doing in the classroom, but adds so many things that you just can't do in the classroom. So we really see it as a way to support schools, not to add to their burden. In fact, to get back to the kind of, the COVID recovery and giving kids a fun time outside, and the classroom teachers. We have so many classroom teachers who leave an outdoor school experience and say, I've learned so much watching the outdoor school educators. I feel recharged to go back into the classroom with new ideas. So it's as much of a benefit to the classroom teachers as it is to the students who attend.
And I'll just add in there, once the bill is printed, you'll see that it really is broad categories of, one example is students' understanding of conserving and developing marine and estuarine resources, to conduct and sponsor scientific research, to promote and develop the Maine coastal fishing industries. When we drafted that language, we really thought about the different agencies in the Maine state's government and how these could touch on each of those items. And one other point, when we talked to Washington and Oregon, one of their models was that, I think both actually, that the schools applied for the grant. And, we heard that worked for them, but what we heard from our school partners was that they're tired. They already have so many things on their plate. And so we wanted to make this as easy for them as possible. And so that's where we had the outdoor centers applying for those grants that would be going to funding the programming.
Actually, Anne, I learned from a Washington colleague just a couple of weeks ago, it's not working in Washington. The way they've set it up, the schools have to do all the work, and they wish they could partner up with the outdoor school providers to speed the process. And we early on, we were talking with Department of Ed, and this is very much an educational initiative, but we're also excited that, being able to partner with the Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry really puts a focal point on the content of what we're doing and the workforce development potential in the areas of agriculture and conservation and forestry, which are all huge parts of our curriculum.
That's really interesting. And I love the idea of making this as easy as possible for teachers and for schools. And that feels like a huge piece of equitable implementation too, because of course the schools that have the most resources have the most resources. So thank you. That feels very, very wise. Thinking again about that age range, that 4th to 8th grade age range. Gosh, we've just seen so much in the news lately about kids' mental health. And part of that is that COVID recovery that we're all still experiencing. But I'm curious whether there's any data about the benefits of outdoor schools, particularly on mental health, but tell us all the good things.
I'm just gonna send to everyone, there's a wider national effort. It was started by Nature Bridge out in California. They got a Bechtel funding to do a deep dive on the impacts on social emotional wellness and learning at outdoor schools like ours. The site's grow-outside.org. But it's so amazing, even though we are very much a science education organizations that we're doing field ecology, we have strong focus on sustainability. But that crucial IQ plus EQ, that cognitive learning needs that strong social emotional foundation. And I love a quote of a colleague of ours, John DiDiego down at the Great Smokies Institute in Tremont once said, you know what outdoor schools do really well? Kindness. And I think in the world we're living in now, the idea to have these outdoor education mentors who make kids feel happy and wanted and give them agency and support their curiosity is really powerful. So I think if you have time, that website's a good kind of initial dive into that impact. And I know I've had numerous conversations with Nick and our other Maine Outdoor School colleagues. Our field is so ripe for some really good research. And we've already, as the Environmental Living and Learning for Maine Students Network, we've done work with University of Maine. But I think that kind of theory of change, the idea that these programs can lead to really exciting change and outlooks of youth, is something we look forward to really diving in more deeply as we move ahead.
Yeah. I'll just say that there's certainly research into benefits of this education that's beyond the four walls of a classroom, and in developing those 21st century skill building tools, the being able to be a great communicator, problem solving, teamwork, those kinds of things. Like that said, there's a lot of room to broaden and deepen the research, as Drew mentioned, and in fact, there's, as part of the legislation, there's an evaluation piece that maybe, Anne, that's maybe what you wanted to mention as well. And this legislation is for 3 years, and so it's really important that there's a robust evaluation piece so that we can, learn from these first few years and improve the design and decisions for outdoor school.
Nick, you read my brain. We've been working together long enough that now we can all just do the mind meld.
I love it. I love it. It feels pretty clear that this is a good thing. This is a good idea. And of course, there's also been lots in the news about the state budget and trying to figure all of that out. So I can anticipate a funding question. But is there any actual opposition to this bill? Where is our, and I guess part two of that is, where is our advocacy most important, do you think?
So that is, we get that question, is the funding, is how it all shakes out. I think Maine is in a good spot right now where it's not operating a deficit, but there's still a lot of important programs that need to be funded. And that's where we've been working with the governor's office and really talking about being a part of that change package. And one of the key things that they have noticed is that our bill has bipartisan support. And so this is an issue that, cross party lines, they're supporting and they're excited about it. Senator Lisa Keim is one of our co-sponsors, and she's in the Senate Minority Leadership Group. And so when we hear, how can we support it, it's talking to all your legislators, it's talking to your friends across the aisle. Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine is one of our community partners. We think that this really crosses those bridges. Any opposition, I think it's just that, sometimes the Department of Education already has programming in place. Like, for example, they did the climate ed bill last year, so why is this needed? And what we say to that is that our kids need programming like this right now. Kathleen, you mentioned mental health. I was in a committee meeting and heard that the Journal of Pediatric Medicine put out a study that in 2019, Maine was the highest rates of mental health problems for children. And I think that we need to really focus on how to be thinking long-term about supporting our young people. And this is one of those efforts. So the Department of Education has a lot of great programs, but as Drew said, it's a constellation of programs. This is just one thing, and it builds on all the great work that's already been done.
And Governor Mills has already headed in this direction. Her Maine Outdoor Learning Initiative, which was repurposing of COVID funds. Definitely last summer and coming up this summer, Nick and I have been honored that our organizations have been part of the awardees for that. But that's limited COVID funds at smaller levels and isn't reaching all the kids in Maine. So we really see almost the Outdoor School for All Maine Students is the next step in the idea of Maine Outdoor Learning Initiative, that every kid has a chance to be at a Schoodic or a Chewonki or a Ripple Effect or any of the many great outdoor school programs.
So are there enough outdoor school programs, or is this going to also help us create some new programs? And if there are organizations out there that are offering outdoor education, how can they get involved with you all and with this campaign?
That's a great question, Kathleen. That the Maine Outdoor School, and Nick, you did such a nice job delineating the legislation and the network is really there to support a community of practice. I think my favorite part of getting to work with Nick and all the other outdoor school colleagues is we're always upping our game. And part of our focus is not to dilute the force of outdoor school, to have it be academically rigorous and ecology and sustainability focused and social and emotionally aware and impactful. So as we grow, those kind of standards are something we I think you said earlier, Nick, rising tides bring up all boats, to really help support this network. And the exciting thing right now with the current folks in discussion in this new Maine Outdoor School for All network, we actually have close to capacity right now to serve 14,000 Maine students a year. Not that there may be other organizations that will be joining that network that we may not be aware of, but right now, even the current 10 or so, or am I right, Nick? It's about 10 right now, outdoor schools that are in conversation. We did a capacity analysis, and we actually have the capacity to do 14,000. We're very near that capacity already, which I think is important during committee hearing. If we go and we say, this is a great idea, do you have a capacity? And we look chagrined and say, well, we have half capacity. We have the capacity for that access for all.
And I think to your point, Kathleen, too, is that we're excited about bringing more people into the fold. And we think that's where the UMaine Cooperative Extension can play that role. They play that role in the other states where, we can seek private funds that can help build infrastructure, maybe a summer camp that doesn't have the facility to have an outdoor program in the fall. And, that's one of the things that we're excited, and I know UMaine Cooperative Extension is excited about, is building up more places. And that gets to that economic workforce development piece that is a really important part of this as well.
And lastly, I'll just say that although we certainly have the capacity as far as numbers go, the sort of spatial coverage across the whole state, there are some areas that, where schools are much closer to outdoor schools than others. And so that's a piece that we will need to address. And we do recognize that, for example, areas up in the county, in Aroostook County, where some schools may be quite a distance away, that's something that's, an issue that's existed. And through this funding, through this legislation, we would be able to help to address that issue, to make sure that there are outdoor schools available for, all school districts and ultimately all Maine students.
And that includes too, depending on, we recognize that travel costs, busing to get to our sites. But what's been great about our network for the past 14 years, with the funding we've received from Sewell Foundation and the own fundraising we do individually, and then schools have often had PTO support, we have been able to have a really diversified funding stream, even though, should the Outdoor School for All Maine Students pass, that's a significant, because it covers the tuition. But we are very confident that we have the problem solving skills to figure out things like busing and transportation and all that good stuff.
You are clearly a powerful and inspired group. So I have no doubt that is that you're up to whatever, that's a great challenge to figure out how we get everybody to these programs, how we expand programs in parts of the state that maybe don't have the same sort of density of opportunity right now. Thank you. Thank you for the work that you are doing. Thank you for sharing it with us today. Thanks to everyone who joined us today. We could, as always, we could keep going for the rest of the afternoon, but we will let you go on and promise that later this afternoon, you will receive a link to the recording, whole bunch of resources, and as always, invite you to share those far and wide. Forward them to your favorite science teacher, your favorite kid, and say, hey, look at what's going on. I know when it comes time for this bill to be heard in the legislature, the voices of, all of our voices matter. The voices of students and teachers carry a particular weight that is just absolutely crucial. So thank you for all of that. We will be back in this space next week to explore the role of poll workers in supporting American democracy and find out a little bit about what it is like to do this vital work in our current political climate. Should be pretty juicy. See you then.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you. This was great.